goes with what a question can answer. If you could just sort of define the line between journalism and documentary filmmaking, and what does poetic journalism mean to you? Like why the title of this panel? What does it mean, and what's the difference between that and journalism?
Well, I think that, I mean, this is a question that we ask ourselves and it's being asked in the nonfiction world on a daily basis. Everyone wants to know where that line is. Have you crossed the line?
And where does it get blurry?
Where does it get blurry, which is always, which is everywhere, which is every day. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd say that, I mean, personally as a I mean, you know, we can get into the whole philosophical conversation about if you can ever truly recount to anyone what it was really like and how the facts will inevitably always get somehow changed in the retelling of a story, and that happens in the newspaper, that happens in film. We don't really strive to, you know, give you the facts exactly as we experience them. I mean, if we, you know, I guess if we were, you know, in writing for the newspaper, I would definitely be in the editorial page. You know, I would be an editorial page writer, because obviously when you introduce the camera to in any situation, you've changed the events in some kind of way. But I would say that in terms of our filmmaking, meaning myself and my co-director Rachel, I want to translate to the audience what it felt like for us to be there. You know, in Detropia in Detroit, which is my hometown, people are calling it a film that's, you know, it's sort of a dreamscape. Well, you might go to Detroit tomorrow and not recognize the Detroit that we show you in the film, because we experienced it as that, and we strove to shoot it in a way to show you how we see the city and how we feel the city is. And so right there, the line, the blurring, I mean, it's all blurry, and that's the beauty of it, because you're seeing an edited, curated version of events, and I'm very, very fine with that. And I think most audiences are sophisticated enough to realize that. Although, you know, if a film is pretending to just give you the facts and you know, lay out things and have a very journalistic approach to it, then I think the expectation of the audience is different. So I think the audience decides in the first 5 or 10 minutes, and they can understand your shorthand, and they understand how much to take as absolute fact and how much is sort of the vision of the director. And I think that there's that silent pact that we have with the audience, and that we all get on the same page very early in a film.
Either of you want to add to that? I mean, is it fair to assume that audiences understand that? I mean,
well,
I mean,
I don't know.
Is that an assumption that's fair?
Well, I kind of want to evade the question for a second and say that I don't know if I'm somewhat unique in the panel, because I don't know your backgrounds, but I was trained as a sociologist with a PhD, so everything that I had to do was rigorous and empirical, and any kind of statement that we had made or written or recorded had to be verified, and we had to back it up. So when we entered the documentary realm of film, I mean, everything was really literal. Our first film was exceptionally literal. And I realized when I watched these other movies, like, it didn't have to be literal. You can make intimations and these dreamlike sequences to create a different kind of mood. And in sociology, there's no mood. Forget mood, where I came from. So this has all been very new to me. Even the footage I saw of your film up there. I mean, how do you distinguish that from news and journalism and empiricism and poetry?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I mean, in our case, it's kind of an unusual case because we're dealing with a historical event, particularly a revolution that we're trying to be very true to in terms of what happened. So, in a sense, you can watch our film, and you can feel that you get a very clear timeline of events and images that happened that are historical. And in a sense, I think a film is kind of, you know, you have to draw your audience in, and however you do that, whether it's through mood moments or through empirical moments, I think our job is to play with expectations and play with people's, you know, sense of safety, in a sense. You know, you kind of, if you can draw in an audience that trusts to fit your movie, then they're like, you know, they're like clay in your hand. You can just play with that in however you want to manipulate them. So in our case, we want to manipulate your emotions, and I think we use empirical scenes in a sense, or very kind of reality scenes, to essentially establish trust with the audience. And once they trust a movie, then we can take them down the rabbit hole and we can create these mood moments where it's complete poetry and just manipulate the emotional range of the audience. So especially in this movie, we're going from like emotional highs to emotional lows in like, 10 seconds. Sure. So you kind of, this is what makes people kind of play that, is this kind of emotional aerobics, And I don't think there's really any journalism anymore. I think journalism is, especially in mainstream media or even any printed thing or institutionalized, mouthpiece, whether it's like TV news or whatever, is all just propaganda. There is no journalism anymore. There's no true story. It's just policy or a narrative that's been established kind of before that particular story. So, for example, if we're made to believe a certain way about a particular issue, whether it's a war or whatever, people who consume, news are just kind of being fed the same narrative.
So it's almost as though you're saying that journalism is now more mimicking the manipulation that happens in documentary film rather than the other way around? No, I mean, I'm kind of talking about just what directors do in terms of documentary film. It's the same as what we do in feature film. We're playing with your emotions. And I think people have different, there's a range of interpretation. Some people are very empirical and very scientific about what they do, and some others are very poetic and interpretive. It's subjective, but I think all in all, and maybe this is going to be the next round of what we talk about, is that journalism is completely like, it's just a corpse. There is no journalism, because as soon as you start working for a TV channel or a newspaper, you're towing the line of whatever policy that they're pushing, and it's like it has nothing to do with the truth. So our job is to kind of try to bring that home, but I mean, we're very selfish in how we interpret what we're doing, and the freedom of that poetic kind of cinematic language is kind of why I make films. It's not, I'm not trying to tell anything other than my point of view. Gotcha.
And I think people flock to documentaries actually more and more as an alternative to the television news, is my understanding. And I don't think that's unwise, because I think that oftentimes we're more transparent about what we're trying to do in our films than Fox or CNN. And I mean, really, it's like they are pushing that they have fair and balanced, and they've got one person from each representative. If they're making a film in Egypt, they go right to Tahrir Square every day, and they talk to the same friggin' 4 people. It's like they're not inside the apartment. I mean, and what you showed in your film was your experiencing of historical events. You don't pretend that they are everyone's experience in the film. It's you and your friends in the apartment. There's a child. I mean, I saw the film at Sundance, and it's like, we're all on the same page that this is what happened to you and over those days, and you did a chronology in a historical timeline, but there's no pretending that you have the absolute version of the revolution, because why would you? Why should you? How can you? Whereas if you turn on the news, it's like, live, just in, right now, we're absolutely telling you this is what's going on. So, and I think people have stopped believing that when they turn on the television, and that's partly why the people will spend the time with the DVD or looking for films online, that they can experience 90 minutes, and then they can come to their own conclusions, even if we have a much messier form. I wouldn't say, I hear you when you say journalism is dead. I know several reporters at the BBC and at the New York Times that I would consider absolutely soldiers and people who are striving and putting themselves in dangerous situations, including a few people that we lost in the last month, that I think are not towing any line. Sadly, the New York Times lost so much credibility when they started pushing the war in Iraq, and that was really the moment that all of us said, oh my God, them too, But I would say there's still some people out there fighting for journalistic integrity. I do not include any of those people on the television news, however. I think the only thing left for real journalism in its traditional sense is in print, I would say. But I think that the turn towards documentaries is very, very interesting. People just want more. They don't believe what they're seeing. And they shouldn't.
So going back to the thought on independence, I know, we see so many, at the Fledgling Fund, we see, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of films every year, right? And you can, going back to sort of independence in journalism, where does that stand in the documentary film world? There's you have influencing factors such as funders and broadcasters and all the things that that it is the universe that the film you're making exists in. You cannot help it. How does that compare to the influence that, say, Universal has over NBC? What's the difference? What's the difference there? Is documentary film truly independent still?
Well, what surprises me the most about our most recent film, Girl Model, is that people accept the film on faith and trust, yet there's absolutely no one regulating anything that we put in the movie at all. We can put a sentence in the movie and people accept it. We could have made it up. There's no body of people, fact-checking any kind of sentence. Like, your movie has a few statements in it, correct? Statistics as well.
And we fact-check those ourselves.
Right,
yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, we're all selective on which statement we're placing in this movie. So what also interests me about that is how does a film like yours or ours become a trope? That is, what happens when it does stand in for, it's a very small part that stands in for the whole. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure how audiences interpret, those kinds of stories that are non-factual. They become tropes.
Yeah.
So.
In terms of the idea of independence of the question, sure, there are, depending on your executives at different networks, there's going to be influence. I mean, we have editorial control in all of our work, and we always have. We were lucky that way. So even when we do a film with HBO, I know our work is independent. Not everyone has that experience. So, what about you? You guys totally did it yourself and have no.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really think about what would be appropriate, I suppose. Even the trailer, it's got like 27 fucks in it.
The movie's got like 2,700.
Yeah. I mean, it's.
You have to bleep the entire thing. Shows in the U.S.
It's it's very punk rock, but that's kind of like.
It is very punk rock.
That's the style of what we're doing in this particular project, and I think. Like I said, we're also, establishing trust with the audience, and if the audience feels that you're being really honest, and putting 27 fucks into a movie can almost create that kind of bond between an audience and the film itself. You can go, oh wow, they didn't censor themselves, and they didn't even beep it, and so that must be real, and it is real in our particular sense, in our particular film. We're not. We're not really censoring ourselves. We're showing things that are uncomfortable to watch. So I think people kind of feel that, oh gosh, I'm really being shown something. And like I said, we're just making movies, and part of our job is to manipulate, like I said, these emotional ranges of our audience, and to play with people, because at the end of the day, they've come out to a dark room as a collective group to experience something as a group. Not to just get some information and go home, or check the latest policy line on, is it Romney or, Santorum, who's the better guy. Yeah, but all this time is spent on two losers, so I mean, who cares, I don't even care. I don't care, because there's no substance to it. So am I supposed to care about that, or is it designed as a media tool for me not to care about these Republican candidates so that I slide to Obama? How is it being presented? Is how media and news is presented to audiences, I think, can also manipulate where they go and what they believe and what they don't believe in. So. And
also, just to follow up on what you're asking about, who's got editorial control and that this isn't regulated, and all this is true. But I'm thinking about it in the last 10 years, in terms of scandals that happened when things weren't true. They came out of writers, novelists, the Oprah Book Club scandal. When is the last time a documentary film was found to have tons of falsehoods? There has not been that scandal, except there are a few 2020s or 48 Hours or ABC News.
Is it because people
inconvenient truth?
The inconvenient truth.
But that's, of course, depending on what your point of view is.
Okay, well, that's a...
But I think it's...
Do you believe in global warming, or do you not? You know?
Yeah, but we're going to talk about that. It's like there's scientific facts.
Yeah, but people are debating that line, you know?
And that brought up a very interesting scandal. Although I kind of would put that in a class by itself, because it's not like they manufactured. Well, some people would say they manufactured those. Well, I don't think that's the same, because they used it. I mean, when you have 90%, I cannot believe we're debating this. When you have like 90% of the scientific community, they felt comfortable saying 90% of all published scientists believe that. They did say that in the film. They didn't say, so. But in terms of big scandals where people have manufactured fake scenes and used actors and it wasn't true, that's not really happened. I'm not saying it won't. Well, Michael Moore's a performance artist. Michael Moore's a performance artist.
But does mainstream America see him as that?
Yes.
I think in the documentary world we see him as that.
He, knocks on doors of the United States Treasury and demands rights for all human beings. I mean, I don't really think that, and there's a lot of comedy in his routine. I would say, in my mind, Michael Moore also is a celebrity, a persona, a phenomenon. It's clearly editorial, and it's clearly his opinion, his emotion. I don't think he presents things as the absolute fact. He's very emotionally invested in those.
But if he's a performance artist, then why does he make these claims that he's fact-checking everything? Like everything that I put in this movie, Fahrenheit 9/11, is absolutely true. So how can you be both? How can you be this empiricist but also a performance artist?
And then they've been fact-checked, which
but a performance artist doesn't care about fact.
But you're making rules about documentaries that we're saying should not exist. It's like he's allowed to have facts in his film that have been written out and fact-checked, and he's also allowed in the next scene to say, I think it's fucking bullshit that this and that and the other thing, and this is, socialism is the way to go. I mean, he can give his opinions and also include facts as if they're presented, on the card. I mean, I think there's a differentiation between when he's ranting versus when he puts a fact on the screen. Yeah. And his facts on the screens have been checked. But is he not allowed to also opine in the next scene?
Isn't that, that's what we all do.
Facile? I mean, exactly.
I mean, that's what you're saying you do.
Sure. I mean, I think that's all right. I guess I have a lot of faith in the audience, and especially people who are seeking out this type of film. Let's be honest, are generally people who are can handle different signals coming from a filmmaker. I don't think that we have to handhold our audiences and say, well, what Michael just said in this scene isn't actually a fact. That's his opinion. And I mean, come on, it's just like, I think you have to be, we're assuming a grown-upness, that's not a word, in our audiences in nonfiction film, and I think that's probably okay. Yeah.
I'll just add to that a little bit, because I worked as an editor on a film called Control Room, which was about media and the Gulf War. And I think I probably remember most stuff that didn't make the edit, ultimately, but because we had like 400 hours of footage, including, actual news reports by Al Jazeera and stuff. And one of the most striking images that I remember, actually, of just scanning the footage, I don't even know if it made the movie, but there was this one character who was a Fox journalist, and his journalism consisted of him getting his morning coffee, walking down the hall to the military press office, checking the door for the latest highlights of what the press blurbs were from the military. He'd just check and go, oh, nothing new today, and go back to his office, and that was his journalism. He didn't go into investigating the story at all. He was just towing the line.
Now we know why you're so jaded. That helps.
Well, I mean, he's just towing the line as he's just regurgitating whatever the military wants Fox to say. Is this journalism or is it propaganda? I mean,
the easy route.
Yeah, this is it. He didn't double check any sources. So, like I said, it's just a big pile of shit. Because it's not. I'm sorry, but I don't watch TV, like I said, because I just don't believe it. There's no trust established between the TV and the audience. It's gone. So we have to reestablish that trust. People are hungry, they're thirsty, they're in the desert, they're starving, and they'll give you give them one little fish bone with a piece of meat on it, and people will go, thank you, give me, piece of truth.
Well, but so how do you justify that with what you said at the beginning? So I want to hold that thought.
No, it's not that big of a deal.
With what you said, sort of, but your job is also to manipulate an audience. You know, if they're searching for that nugget of truth.
Sure.
But your job is to give them that and then steer them down a totally different path if you so choose.
If I want to, if it serves the story, and that's where I think that's where the poetry comes in, because you want to kind of razzle and dazzle them with some kind of something truthful they can identify as what you might call truth. But then that poetry becomes those moments where you've just got them, you know, they're just standing there naked in front of you, and you can do anything you want with them. So those are the moments where you really, I think, start to appeal to people's emotions, and so much media and journalism is just appealing to their intellect. You know, there's no bridge between the heart and the mind. It's, you know, what part of journalism is appealing to the heart? Maybe a compelling story, but the way it's covered is, I think, very, you know, it's just very kind of by the book in terms of, it's got a formula, it's got a structure that you can't really play with. The content itself can be emotional, you know?
Yeah, Nicholas Kristof talks a lot about that as far as when he talks about compassion fatigue and his sort of never-ending journey to tell that one story about a child that illustrates what's going on in Sudan or Thailand, that emotional appeal that you don't get on the front page, but you get on the editorial page in such a deeper, more intense way. What were you going to say, Heidi?
I was just going to say that the structure of news is completely different to what we do, and also their budgets and their timetable. They have got such a little amount of time allotted to them to go cover the story. Whereas most of us, I mean, you know, I saw Mighty God Made in China, for example. I mean, you know, you go to the heart of, you choose the matter to go to the heart of. Okay, so we've already narrowed the storyline when we go, but we'll go there. We'll spend months, years, most of us. I mean, making these films. It's just the traditional journalistic model doesn't allow for that anymore. There's no more money for that. There's no more time for that. The expectation, the turnaround. You hear people say, I had some of my friends work for Brian Williams, and she says, I can't meet you for a drink time, crashing a story. They call it crashing. It's all these words that they use are so aggressive and quick, and I think, wow, you know, I just moved to Detroit for a year and a half, and we're not done yet. We're still editing, and there's still going to be things omitted and hundreds of hours of footage that aren't used, and it's still going to be flawed, and it's not going to be the full story. But at least I'll walk away knowing that I spent like a year there. It's really what I found, really, or what. So I just think that they're already set up to fail from the beginning. The reporters of today, because there's just no money left in these departments. And they're closing bureaus down in important places. And don't you always read the paper, and when you see, you know, something's reported about Syria, but they're reporting it from Lebanon, and of course they're in Beirut because for whatever reason it's too dangerous, they had to leave. And I'm already like, okay, you're in Beirut doing this. How did you get the story? I know you weren't there when this happened. Who told you this? So I find myself now really looking to where it was reported from and who was there and what the backstory is, because I don't know if I should believe it. So it's just not set up the way, and as much as flawed as what we do is, and as problematic as what we do is, it's like we do spend months and months and months, most of us, on the ground. So the outcome is going to inevitably be so much different, and I think richer.
I was hoping that we could also talk a little bit about specific examples. So specific examples where this idea of poetry and art and manipulation, or whatever you want to call it, has manifested itself on the screen in your current film, or examples of in your work. Just to break it down a little bit, what does it mean? What are those decisions you have made that have ended up on the screen? Anybody?
What?
Are you revealing? Is this revealing your secrets? Sorry.
Well, most of what we do, I don't know how often it translates. Like, we have intention, but these intentions are... We work for a month on one scene that might take 2.5 minutes of your time to watch, and it may not work, and we remove it and we do it again. But I'll give you an example. Since I am a sociologist, there's these two terms called front stage and backstage. And, you know, the front stage is basically what we want you to see. You know, the appearance given off. we hope you accept as true and factual. And then there's the backstage, basically when you let your hair down and you get to be someone else. And I gave this example the other day, and that's how we opened the movie. And that's what I like so much about the Girl Model movie is there's hundreds of girls on stage, and there's the front stage, and someone arranged this, and they're showing you what they want you to see. Well, we immediately turn to the backstage and then go behind the scenes to and we hope that lets the audience know that, look, someone's staging something here for you, but we're going to acknowledge that this exists, but we're also going to go behind the scenes to try to show you how this has been staged, who set up this stage, why are they setting up this stage of hundreds of girls to be recruited as so-called models. And so that's one of what I call, one of the poetic ways in which we establish immediately what we're attempting to do. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it works, but that was our intent.
I think it did.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's beautiful. Yeah.
Well, we did a film 2 years ago called 12th in Delaware, and basically it takes place, we spent 1 year on a street corner in Florida, in a town called Fort Pierce, and on one side of the street is an abortion clinic, and right across the street, a street about this size of this street, thin, there's a pro-life clinic that disguises itself in a way as an abortion clinic. So women often end up in the wrong place. So they think they're in the abortion clinic and they're in the pro-life clinic. It's totally legal in the United States. They don't have to identify themselves as, and it's called, the name is almost the same, Pregnancy Care Center. Which one do Women's World, they're the same, you don't know which is which. So we were trying to show and expose that there are thousands and thousands of these fake abortion clinics operating across the country. All of them are next door to or across the street from a real abortion clinic. So the whole thing is, the confusion is part of the deal. We got access inside the fake abortion clinic, the pro-life clinic, and so we had to choose how to film both sides of the street. So every day in front of the abortion clinic, there's protesters that are friendly with the pro-life clinic we were filming within. So we filmed mostly through windows. We only used a long lens when shooting the abortion clinic because they were always watching the abortion clinic, how many people came in, how many people left, and they would communicate with the protesters. So we shot through curtains and shot through windows and only used the long lens on the protesters and on the abortion clinic, and the perspective was always quite far, and we'd push, you could tell that we'd push to the end of the lens because we were with the pro-life side of the street. And about 3/4 through the movie, and this was all done obviously intentionally with a lot of thought, we finally got access into the abortion clinic. And we completely switched the perspective. And so for the first time, you saw the abortion clinic not through glass. And for the first time, we got inside the garage of the abortion clinic. And so when the garage door opened, you saw the place that you've been inside the whole time. And it was just like we used camera work in a poetic sense to communicate to the audience we'd crossed to the other side and that they were about to go into the world that you've been observing for the last 45 minutes that you didn't think you'd get inside of. And then we started using tight shots, and we no longer went with it because we didn't have to. Now we had access to both. And so now we will act as if it's easy to cross, and we'll use the camera angles will show you and introduce you to the idea that now we're going to be crossing back and forth. And I mean, these were decisions that were made carefully with our cinematographer. I think they worked. Because the claustrophobia, we use the camera to make the audience either feel claustrophobic, fearful, curious, and then wide open. So these are the kind of decisions that you make that matter. I mean, Alfred Hitchcock taught us that. Well, in the U.S. anyway, I studied his films as a kid. The use of the camera, it's important. It's not, you don't just hit record. It's the thought goes into creating emotion and creating tension. And if you're in a room and someone says, well, how did it go? And you say, that was so tense I could cut it with a knife. Well, how do you take that phrase and that feeling and give it to your audience? Well, you have to do it in the camera. And with music and other tools. But one of those tools is that camera and how you're going to use it. And so that was one of those films where we really went down that rabbit hole visually and in an attempt to create emotion.
Yeah, great example.
I can't really...
Underline.
Well, I mean, in our particular film, there's many poetic moments, but I think the difference is sort of the approach in our particular film, because our film was very much an accidental movie, and I think there's a fundamental difference between, verite coverage of a film where you just do hit record, but you're capturing moments that you don't set up, and you don't have the luxury to set up. I like those because you're really in the thick of battle, and you kind of have to just capture the moment. You don't have a choice of, is it going to be this long lens or this wide lens or close or handheld or, and
It's immediate.
yeah, and and you just have to react to the moment, and of course construct it later in the editing room. But I think there's a fine line between setting up the shots too much and getting too kind of interpretive and too creative, especially in documentary, where things are too intentional. I'm very sensitive to whether I believe a film or not, and the believability level is based on how intentional is this film. Do I feel the intention? Do I feel the script? Do I feel this creative interpretation of the presentation of my story? And if I feel it too much, then I don't believe the film.
And where's the motivation?
Yeah, I mean, it's my point of view. I mean, my kind of point of view. But I feel that we have. It's a fine line. You've got to show that you're truthful to your audience, and then you can do what you want. But if you kind of overdo it, it's too constructed, then you're just fulfilling your own script, and you're slotting in shots that are fulfilling your own narrative.
Because sure, absolutely. But I think that they're all constructed. And if we pretend that they're not constructed, they are constructed. You can shoot on the street in Egypt, or in Cairo for 30 days in a row. It's all your perspective. There's hundreds of hours of footage. You're putting that together. There's music to it. So they're all constructed. Totally. So I hear you. Yeah. So but it is the contact with the audience. The audience doesn't want to feel manipulated unless they're on board and they know that you're trying to tell them a specific story. Again, that's first 10 minutes with an audience where you've made your deal, and they have to accept or reject. And so I think that's a very, very crucial time that happens between the filmmaker and the audience. It's like, this is how I'm going to tell the story. Will you go along with me?
Right.
Will you not go along with me? I'm going to show you my cards. This is how we're going to do this story. I hope you'll join me, and I hope we're being honest enough with our intention. And usually it has worked with us because, we really try to lay it out from the beginning of what kind of journey you're going to go on and let them decide. Instead of 3/4 through the film or at the end of the film doing something that's completely outrageous and unlike the rest of the film, that's when you lose people. I think there has to be a consistency to it. And I agree, it's a very, very fine line of how that construction of the story is communicated to the audience.
But it's also the aspects of music. That's something that I noticed a lot of journalists don't have access to. And this film that I mentioned earlier, Sweetgrass, there's not a second of music in the story. And I talked to the director. They call themselves recordists. They claim they don't direct. They record, which is interesting. And I asked them why, and they said that because they think that the inclusion of music is a cue to indicate to the audience, I want you to feel this way right now.
Yeah,
it is. And music's
that becomes. Well, you mentioned the word manipulation, and I'm wondering if manipulation has this negative connotation attached to it, or if.
Or do you mean emotional manipulation in a way that's just
emotional manipulation in the sense that, hey, we're making a movie,
right? That's what I thought you meant.
And if if it depends how creative you want to get, and how
because you mentioned that the news and the journalism that you read or don't read actually is manipulative, and you accept that. But you're talking about a very specific form of manipulation. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think the difference between sort of information presentation and sort of mood presentation. It's really the two ends of the spectrum,
Is it also about the pact that you have with an audience versus what audiences assume that they're getting from journalism, and perhaps are not? I mean, if you're saying that audiences come in to see your film and know that it's your story, not the story, right? It's your vision of what you experienced. Versus when people read an article on the front page of the Times, they assume that it is the story, whereas the truth is it's still a part of it, and it's still highly manipulated.
Totally.
And if you look at I think an interesting example, maybe I'm just changing the subject, I don't mean to if I am, but I'm, Waiting for Superman, Davis's last film about education. It became, like you say, trope, it became the film about education made in this decade. Like, this is the education movie. And we actually were starting to develop a film, an educational film, and we were almost like, we kind of abandoned it when the movie came out because it was like, no one's gonna ever watch our version of it because this is the education movie. And that's gonna happen, there's gonna be the blank movie. You know, The Inside Job became the movie about the financial crisis. That's gonna happen, that's just life. But, you know, so Davis Guggenheim's driving down the street and he opens the movie, he does the voiceover. I drive by the school every day, I drive by the public school, but I take my kids to the private school and I feel so guilty about it. And when I was a kid, it's clearly curated, it's narrated, it's his personal story, there's footage of Superman, and then he chooses 3 kids all trying to get into these schools. It's character driven. We all know in the audience that this is a slightly personal story because he says it and he's talking in it, and then you see that there's 3 little kids and you know there's only 3 kids in the movie, so you know it's their stories. We know it's not everybody's story, but we decided, or he tried to help us decide, that this was going to be the education movie, that we could understand the problems of American education through these little kids. And to some extent, he did a good job at that. So it's like, well, did he manipulate? I mean, he told us, he was very honest. He said, this is my kid, this is why I'm making the film, these are the... But we decided that, man, we're going to let this represent what's wrong with public education.
Well, and also
and
because it was chock full of facts and statistics and figures,
and then
which made it feel like journalism,
right?
And not that.
So he went back and forth between, let me give you some facts, and then I'm going to go back to this. So I think all of that coincided pretty well in one film. Yeah. He did quite a good job. But I think everybody also knew that those stories of those kids isn't the story of everyone. But we all decided that we're going to let this be our example of what's wrong. And I think films with the music and with the manipulation can do that in a way that a story on 60 Minutes might not be able to. So in a way, that was a success story for a documentary that's policy related. Yeah. So you know.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting too when you look at sort of what becomes the story, the sort of leading piece that everyone's talking about, the subject. Those are all films that have massive amounts of money behind them and massive organizations. They are not the independent scrappy filmmaker on the ground.
No, that's participant all the way.
That's participant in Davis's pull, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, that's fairly clear that that's what happened there, for better or worse.
Sure.
Right. So, I think that extrapolates out into a lot of examples like that. So, for better or worse. So. I just wanted to sort of one last sort of closing thing, and then we'll open it up to questions. Can I get a time check first of all? How much time do we have left?
11:25 now.
We have 20 minutes left? Excellent. Okay, so actually let's save that. Let's open up to questions and we'll do a last thought at the end. But talk to me, what are you guys thinking? Did any of this anger you? What are your questions? Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, David, you're a sociologist, but I think that most of the best journalism, I think, is coming from people who didn't go to J school. And I had to feel I really like what you said, Heidi, about newspapers and coming to the defense of some newspaper people who are actually doing good journalism and trying to tell the truth. And I haven't seen your film yet. I have seen your film. And I think it really succeeded on, drawing people into revolution. It made me feel like I was really there. But I didn't think it succeeded when it tried to say something bigger. I think it failed when it wanted to make a political statement because there wasn't enough evidence there. You said that Mubarak is a torturer and for 30 years has beat down people, and the freedom fighters were coming up. And there were several other instances where I thought maybe we could have had some contrary evidence, like instead of dismissing the counter-revolutionary, the counter-protesters as thugs, for instance, what was their motivation? And my question to you is, did you ever think that there might be a need for that? Did you ever think about maybe getting some the other viewpoint of the thugs, for instance, into the film?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, in a way, we kind of, with this film, we sort of made our own parachute. We created our own golden parachute in the sense where we're absolving our responsibility of showing both sides of the story. I mean, we're intentionally doing that because we didn't have that story, and that wasn't our intention to do that story, to tell both sides of the story. In this particular case, so I think, I know there are other films coming out that will be able to kind of balance out, you know, say the good guys and the bad guys, and try to contrast that and really go more, you know, in depth into the subject matter, objectively, this word objective. In our case, our golden parachute is saying, look, we're just showing you what we experienced from a very personal level. So, of course, there's stuff missing in the film. I think that in our particular case, we're not appealing to some kind of objectivity or some kind of like, well, I want to present, you know, all sides of the story and let the audience decide. We're being very selfish in our presentation, and we're not really dealing with facts. We're dealing with emotions, you know, and emotions are sort of our currency in the film. So I think that, you know, you have to kind of make a choice when you're doing a documentary. Are you going to present all sides of the story? Is it your job to? Is the film about the information? Is it a teaching experience? Is it a history lesson? Or is it a poem, you know?
Talk about developing a trust with your audience, but when you make a statement like that, and
Yeah.
back it up, I think I'm starting to feel manipulated. With
Totally.
You know,
Well, I kinda-
and I think there's a difference between having a point of view and pushing too far and getting into that land where
Yeah.
you are manipulated.
Yeah.
And that's where journalism crosses the line and becomes propaganda. And I think I was hearing you defending propaganda, if I'm not, you were talking about journalism becoming a corpse today, which I find disheartening, because I think we need journalism in a free society.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I'm not defending propaganda at all. I'm just saying this is what it's become, you know. And I think in our film, probably the first, these title cards where we have at the opening, we make some bold statements. You know, I think the first sentence is a very bold and dramatic statement that Mubarak has suppressed, tortured, and you know, corrupted his people. And we don't actually go into that statement. We don't try to explain that statement. And it is probably the only generalized statement that is unsubstantiated from the filmmaker's point of view, from our kind of our narrative. But at the same time, you know, it's like a blow to the head. You know, we want people to sit up and take notice of the frame of our story, and maybe question that frame later. But at least you've been drawn into it. And we're not actually, our film is not supporting that statement at all. We don't go into explaining that, but we do show in an indirect way the violence and the sort of police violence of the people, how the police are treating the people, without going into detail as to the why, you know. I think that if you get hooked, if you hook an audience, they'll do some more research on their own. I mean, there's only so much we can tackle in a film. And ultimately, we're kind of presenting a frame and presenting one part of the story. Of course, there's an ocean of experiences, especially in the revolution. I showed the film in Cairo, and one of the questions was like, oh, so wait, this was the only movie about the Arab Spring that went to Sundance. So this is all that the Americans know about the revolution. This is not appropriate to present the revolution as this does not represent the revolution. I said, yeah, but nor does this film or this film or this film. It's an ocean of stories. It's an ocean of narratives. And I think collectively, if you really want to know about the revolution, watch as many films as you can and look at it as a collective experience that you then have to kind of discern what you like about it as an individual. You know, and I think, like I said, it's a golden parachute in that particular case. Other films are not so laissez-faire, you know, where you kind of have more of an intention when you do it. We're just capturing the moment. But of course, when we go to edit it, we have to make choices that make people sit up and watch the film, you know. And sometimes you kind of have to throw away stuff that, yeah, sure, is a little bit more fair, you know, angle. On a subject and more, you know, well-rounded, but does it serve your story? Does it serve your emotional line? If it doesn't, then you cut it out. You know? Yes.
Got it. Yeah.
I feel like I'm hearing you guys say you use journalistic skills to do documentaries, so like the camera work or the editing and that type of thing. Because I went to the J school here, and it sounds like all your skills that you're saying and what makes good documentaries are journalistic skills that we're taught here. The transparency, that type of thing, and you put that into your documentary. So I don't know, that's the point I noted. So, and don't base your opinion on reporters off that one Fox guy, because I'm cringed when you said that. I would not do it like that. But my question is, if you guys think journalism is dead, then where does breaking news come into place? I understand spending a year and a half working on a story, but when something like 9/11 happens, or high school shooting, that type of thing, people need to be informed immediately. So don't you think there's also a place for breaking news? That's the reason TV is here, the internet, that type of thing. Is, or you can spend a year and a half working on your story. And where do you guys get your ideas?
Well, first, I didn't say.
So that's a second totally separate
Yeah, I
question.
mean, it relates to though, because you might get your ideas by breaking news stories, and you can tell more in depth later. So.
Great questions.
Wait, I forgot what I was going to say.
Would you concur that journalism is dead? First of
Well,
all?
that's what I was about to say.
One person on the panel said that.
I actually didn't say that journalism is. That's what I wanted to say. But then I had a follow-up statement I forgot. But I don't think journalism is dead. I want to know where journalism is, and that's a question that, where can I find it? Where do I look for it? Where does it exist? And maybe it is in some of the documentaries, and maybe it is some of the breaking news. But most of the breaking news is on the ground. This has happened right now. It's very factual, and I think I'm not defending or I think what's going on is that what we're talking about, what I'm talking about, is there's a process of a kind of a story where we expand a moment to maybe 20 minutes, but there's absolutely no motivation on behalf of the character. And what you were talking about, sir, when a character makes a statement in one of our documentaries, somehow we're held responsible for that statement. But in fact, we might be leaving that statement in the movie precisely because it is a statement of confusion, and we don't know what the truth is. And so then we're playing with the tropes of an unreliable character, an unreliable narrator, which creates a sense of emotional distrust, in the audience. That's what we're going for, at least. So I just wanted to say that. But what's also funny is in this movie that we're showing here down east, everyone considered me a journalist. So I felt like I was standing on the backs of journalism for the last 150 years. They've created this space for me to exist, and suddenly they're telling me, you're a journalist. You need to go find out why these people are doing what they're doing. And I had to say, well, actually, I'm not a journalist. And they, well, why are you here? And I had to explain, well, I'm making a documentary. Well, that's journalism, right? And so we had these conversations with the characters in the movie. So I kind of.
So what did you say when they said that's journalism, right? What was the answer to that?
When they said that's journalism?
Yeah, I mean, how did you distinguish it for these people that were questioning?
Well, when they said you're a journalist, go out and find out why this guy is doing X, Y, and Z, and I said, well, actually, I'm not a journalist, and if that disappoints you, then we should probably talk. And I told the people who said I'm a documentary storyteller, and I need access, and I'm hoping you'll give it to me because I'm actually telling a story. I'm trying to cover your motivation, and since it's character-driven, I want to see what kind of obstacles that you come across. And the person that you don't like is actually, could be a protagonist or an antagonist to you. And they honestly just kind of scratched their head and said, okay, so you don't care why he's doing what he's doing. And that's how it came back. It was they wanted factual information. Why is he doing it? Go out and find out. Is he doing something illegal? And to me, it was more or less, what I'm recording right now is actually much more interesting part of the story.
Yeah. Gotcha.
I think that we could parse in this room or at this festival all day long for journalists or not, and I totally hear you because I also don't walk in the room and give my card and say I'm a journalist. I say I'm a documentary filmmaker. But if there's a tree, I would say that the country feels that we are definitely a branch of journalism. The documentary filmmakers, we are a form of journalism. I'm comfortable with that because people don't feel like parsing words all day long and redefining things. And the society sees us as a form of journalism. And we are, but we're uncomfortable with it because we want the freedom to manipulate emotions and use music and not care about and have unreliable narratives. We don't want to be bound by those traditional rules. So we're uncomfortable with it, but the rest of the country's like, yeah, y'all are kind of journalists, so can we just move on? You know what I mean? And so I understand that. I'm like, okay, yeah, let's move on. I ask questions, I try to be factual, but I also want to do other crazy stuff. So we want the best of both worlds, and I think that's what we do have, and I think that's what you're maybe hearing today.
That's a good point.
That's one thing. Also, I think that I do not believe that journalism is a corpse. I think that it is, we're in a very, very critical moment where I think journalists are absolutely essential to a democratic society, or a society that is trying to be a democratic society. But that's another panel. I also think that breaking news, I think the rest of the country's become more cynical, rightly so, and they want breaking news to be, yes, there's been a plane has hit the South Tower, but I don't want my breaking news to be, you know, Jennifer Lopez had a wardrobe malfunction at the Oscars, and right now they seem to be the same, they get the same, that same strip, you know, breaking, I don't know. So I think everyone's like, and everyone's just decided to turn the whole thing off. The country's just like, oh, well, they think that's the same. Let's turn that off. I can't. It's just this influx of noise, and I think that that's made it harder for the real hardworking journalists who are just out there with their pencil making shit money, trying to tell a story. They've also been lobbed in with these jerks. And I think that Rupert Murdoch and Fox and all these places have really done such damage to the way that we perceive journalists in this society. I don't think we're out of those woods. I think we have a critical moment in that moment of trust. I don't know how it's going to come out, but of course we need journalists. But they should be regulated in some way.
Yeah, but that brings up a point. What's it called? Maybe you guys know, it's like a policy of sort of journalistic integrity for public airwaves that, you know, Canada still has, but America's sort of scrapped.
Journalism professors?
What's it called?
Fairness doctrine.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that sort of defines the standards of what the lie, you know, the lie level of journalism, you know, and I think like channels like CNN and Fox have become so kind of, you know, fake. I mean, it's like you have to pay for them. That sort of legally absolves them from telling a lie to you because you're actually paying for the lie, you know. You want to hear that lie and you're going to pay for it. But if you use a kind of open air, you know, TV on public airwaves that's free to air, there used to be, when I grew up and I was a kid watching, you know, ABC News or something, or Walter Cronkite or whatever, there was that journalistic integrity kind of from a legal perspective. And you'd be investigated if the story kind of stretched the truth a bit too much. And that is gone now from American Airways. You still see it in Canada. So I think there's a bit more integrity for journalism. And anyway, but I'd like to get to another point, was that the phenomenon of YouTube and clips and phones and, you know, somewhere in between the TV news and Half Revolution, there's the guy in the street with the phone, in the phone camera, and posting these clips and Twitter. And if I want the news, I don't turn on the TV because, you know, it's commercials, they're talking about the Super Bowl, the news cycle, la 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 la. I want to know what's happening in Tahrir Square now, you know? And I just heard there's an attack, I can hear gunfire outside my window. Get on Twitter, I got instant images, I got instant video. I have 1,000 comments of people who are right in front of it. I know the story. I can tell exactly within 2 minutes of accessing my Twitter. I can get any number of videos, any number of photographs. I know what's happening hours before the news or the breaking news knows what's really happening. And so why is this phenomenon occur? Why do people use it? What is citizen journalism? You know, and I think that it exists because there's a need for it. We don't believe this media, nor can we wait for it to enter the news cycle.
Or for a documentary film.
Or even, I mean, documentary film, like 2-3 years later, you get the story.
Sure,
I mean,
that's right in between there. And I would like to live in a society where I can go to the twit pic and I can go to the YouTube and see the immediacy, but I also want the analysis.
Yeah.
I want the analysis.
Sure,
I want to sit there and try to have someone help me make sense of what's going on. And that's, to me, where journalists can really step in. Let's help frame the situation because there's a historical piece you might have missed when you went on YouTube and you didn't realize. Let's try to understand this. So analysis analysis, smart analysis, I think is so crucial.
All right, I'm cutting us off for another question.
Okay.
I like it. I know you asked where they get their stories. Well, I'm going to try to get to that at the end. Yeah, go ahead.
It actually really dovetails with what you were just saying. I'm a filmmaker too, and I think that I do believe in objective truth, but I think our perception of it and our transmission of it is always subjective. Always, every time you turn on the camera and it has 4 little walls, you are creating a version of the truth. And you're turning on at a specific time.
Sure.
You're not telling it, recording anything before. It's your version, right? I'm trying to ask this quickly. On this spectrum that we have to choose from in a story that goes from data to information to insight to truth to wisdom, right? I find that with each story I'm telling, I have to try to determine how far I'm willing to take the responsibility on myself to go, how far to this side I'm willing to go. Because on this side, the data, nobody's interested in just data without it being turned into information, right? So you got to take a little step this way. How far, I guess what I'm asking you is at the beginning of your project, or maybe it's in the middle, or maybe it's near the end, I don't know, where do you sort of determine how much of this is, I guess my question is, how much shaping am I going to do here? You're always shaping to some extent.
You get 30 seconds.
I think you have to look in the mirror, go on a gut. For example, we were making Jesus Camp a few years ago. We thought we were making a film about a summer camp, little kids speaking in tongues, being religiously indoctrinated or educated, however you want to call it. We were satisfied making that story. We were filming for a couple of months, and suddenly we realized that we were in the middle of the Christian right that everyone was talking about, this nameless, faceless group that was apparently winning elections for George Bush and had all this power. These were actually the foot soldiers and their parents of the Christian right. We were in the voting bloc. How could we not tell that story? How could we just stick with the summer camp? We owed it to our audience to tell the bigger story. It was a huge pain in the ass. We had to switch what we did and what we filmed because we thought, this is a huge opportunity. We have to do this. People, they keep talking about this invisible body. Well, this is what it is, and this is how it functions. So we altered the film and we widened it, and we did that because the journalistic integrity inside us said, we can't just tell our little cute story about these kids. We can't do that. We have a bigger responsibility. We have to. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but it was one of those, it was like an aha moment where it was like, we have to do it. It has to be done now. And I think, that this represents something about this moment of time with George Bush and the Christian right, and let's do it. And it was just because we felt we had to. That was 45 seconds.
Well said. And these are the last questions. I know we're just about out of time.
I love Jesus Camp, by the way.
Oh,
it's one of my favorite films.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So then let me get back to your quick question. If you can all just quickly answer where you get your stories. Is that what you asked? Where do you get your stories? Why girl model? Why?
Kind of commenting on your question as well in 30 seconds. This is one reason why we're telling 3 stories with the same footage. In one sense, realized we stepped into the space of an empty sardine cannery. It was the last one remaining in the United States. Suddenly someone came in and bought it. He applied for a job creation grant from the federal government. And suddenly we had an extension all the way to the Obama administration. With the pipeline up to Maine, who processes lobsters. But the other story we're telling is a more aesthetic story. We have no concern whatsoever for motivation, who's there, but yet we're trying to look at the transformation of a factory over the course of time. So those are 2 scopes and 2 different ways of shaping the film.
Great. But where do you get your ideas?
Oh, that was the New York Times article that had written about it.
Okay.
From journalists. Thank God for them. And from Ira Glass, and from Radiolab, and from This American Life, and from Arts and Letters magazine, and from The New Yorker, and from eavesdropping on everyone's conversations, and from something that someone's going to tell me in a bar tonight. Everywhere.
Absolutely.
You have to be nosy. You have to have your foot in it, your ears in it, all the time. That's where you get your ideas, but mostly journalists.
Are you really, truly always thinking about what's my next story?
Always. It's almost hard to have any conversation with anyone because you're thinking they're popping off.
Same for you do?
Absolutely, yeah. I just thought at 5.
I don't know. I'm not really hunting for it. I think I just feel it.
Are you going to make another film? I mean, this was a unique situation.
Yeah, I mean, we'll make another film, but like I said, it's sort of like, is it spontaneous or is it planned?
Yeah.
And I love spontaneous movies. I love to just jump into a situation and try to make heads or tails of it while shooting it. Find the story as you film it.
You're a war journalist. A war photographer.
No, but I don't. But not
Don't
war.
use the J
but
word in
like I did.
Sorry. A war storyteller.
Like I did
a worryteller.
A worryteller, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I like to follow characters and see where they lead me. You know, and I think if you have a compelling situation, then ultimately the material is just going to be, you know, it's like your church is like you put yourself in a very unique situation. No matter what you capture, it's going to be, it's going to pop. And if it doesn't, then, you know, you really have to struggle hard to tell a compelling story. And then, you know, might be kind of boring at the end. So I think you got to just jump in the fire, whether you're a journalist or a documentary filmmaker, and find a unique situation that just screams at you, tell my story, you know, and that's really, that's what I go for, you know.
So the good news is that you guys were not boring. Thank you so much, all three of you. Thank you so much. It was really fascinating. Thank you to the audience. I say it every year, True False, still my favorite weekend of the year, best festival I know. So glad you guys are here. Thanks for sharing this with us and for your thoughts at the end. Thank you.
Also, Detropia is playing at 6 o'clock tonight and 10 a.m. tomorrow if you want to come see it.
Woo!